Hello and welcome back to Unmasking the Trans Movement with Jon Uhler. I'm your host, Brad Wilder. Today, Jon is back with another fantastic guest, a great show coming to you all the way from Ireland. We're going to welcome Jana in just a moment. She is a full-time mother. She is the founder of Natural Women's Council. She's an activist, an event planner, and even a life coach. Jon, so much to talk about with Jana. Good to see you back here on the show, pal. How you been?
Good, Brad. Thank you as always. As I say, we couldn't do it without you. Your expertise in helping format this program is essential because we are dealing with tough topics, but we are truly unmasking the trans movement on this program.
Absolutely. So Jana brings with her a wealth of knowledge. She's actually helping us understand that this particular movement isn't just throughout North America. This is actually something that's transpiring around the world, and Jana is going to help us expose some of that today. So maybe you can talk a little bit about Jana and welcome her to the show for us.
Jana, welcome. When I heard about you through a good friend who actually resides in Australia. He got a hold of me and said, Jon, you've got to interview this woman. She is a firebrand. She's a mama bear kind of woman. I said, perfect. So I looked you up. You have a YouTube channel. I looked at some of the videos, and there you were in front of a microphone addressing a crowd and encouraging mothers, encouraging all good people to take seriously what is confronting the good folks of Ireland. But you have an international understanding because you come from the States, you spent time in Canada, and now you are in Ireland. So you're the perfect person for us to talk to because you have an understanding of both continents, as well as from a mother's perspective, from a woman's perspective. You're seeing what the dangers of this grand deception, the dangers of the trans movement is bringing to bear. So Jana, welcome. I couldn't be any more thrilled that you're with us. Talk to us a little bit about your background and then how all of this came to your concern as far as what's going on in schools and how this is, in our estimation, the greatest threat to women and children that we've ever seen in our lifetime, if ever.
Thank you very much for the welcome, Jon and Brad. It's my pleasure to be here to speak to as many people that can hear the views of myself as a concerned parent living here in Ireland, but with a background and growing up in the great state of Maine, USA. Right now, I never had planned to be a campaigner. I had never done any activism work in my life. I worked in multinationals for 20 years, working my way through the last decade. It was into senior management in banking. I became a full-time mom nearly 8 years ago, and I only started doing activist work and campaigning when I started to see back in 2020 that the family unit was under threat. It was starting with the woman, and now it's making the way down to the children, and the entire family unit is under attack. And I realized I can either sit and watch things happen, or I can stand up, speak up with courage, without compromise, and try to make a change for my children. And it was a no-brainer what I was going to do. I thought it's my duty of care as a responsible parent who loves my children unconditionally. It's my duty of care not to be complicit and not to watch this unfold and not to accept this attack on my children. We need to protect childhood and let children be children. Their innocence is short for such a very short time.
Jana, that is exactly what we're all about here. But your concern is, in addition to the kids, as is ours, you are very concerned about what you're seeing as far as an assault. At times now, we're seeing a physical assault on women. We have these sexually deviant men, because my contention is this: no man thinks it's a reasonable option to dress in women's underwear and drag unless he has saturated himself in countless hours of pornography. The issue is deviance. So yes, throughout history, men have always, deviant men have cross-dressed or have tried to co-opt and fulfilled roles in deviant ways, because deviance, this is important, for our viewers to understand, when I use the term deviance from a clinical sense, we're talking about men that are no longer normal in the sense that they are driven to have a negative effect upon people, primarily the most vulnerable, which would be women and children. So, Jana, talk to us about the various concerns that you have, the ways in which you see this playing out, that Ireland has become what amounts to kind of a test ground. You shared that with us prior to us going on air with you. People in all areas of the world need to understand this. So talk to us how you have seen this play out and how it's affecting both women and children.
Yeah. Ireland is a place. When I moved here 20 years ago, I was blown away by the warmth of the people. You hear, 100,000 welcomes. Everyone was so, friendly and warm, helping me transition, moving over here as a young, free, single woman with no family in Ireland. And I was blown away. It wasn't a country that I would ever say is phobic or racist or any of the labels being thrown around it at people that speak up now. And therefore, I think Ireland is one of the countries being tested for all of these agendas, starting with, the erasure of women, which I can talk about from last summer that I campaigned against, the transgender in school, reducing the age of consent, stripping parents, trying to erode parents of their rights. And I believe I listened to a recent podcast by a gentleman, Cliff High, and it was called Triggers. And he talked about the weaponization of empathy. And I thought maybe that's why Ireland, with such warm people, was chosen to be this test ground, because they empathize with the underdog or the minority, or from the days of the feeling really oppressed when Britain, with the troubles from Britain many years ago, there was this shame and this oppression, and then the empathy, that they were a perfect target to say, we will test it in Ireland. Last summer is when I formed the Natural Women's Council. Ireland was proposing, just before the politicians went on their summer holiday, they were going to erase the word woman, she, her, and female from Article 10, 11, and 12 of the Maternity Protection Act. And the reason they were going to do that is to be inclusive to transgender men who breastfeed. Now, as a mom of a daughter, there was no way I was going to let the word woman or she be erased from our legislation. So we campaigned against it. We had a celebration of womanhood to exert our power and say we do not consent. I had live musicians there, and we sang and we danced and we had signs and we gave speeches. And that decision, that ludicrous decision to erase 52% of the population, was luckily reversed. But they were actually considering that, doing it under the radar, not having it go to any sort of referendum, just as they have done with a lot of the school changes, a lot of the school consultations with the ideology coming in school. The consultations were done last October and December, but they were not communicated to teachers or mothers or fathers. They were simply done in the dark, and we had to dig around to find out that they were being done. But you can be assured that the people who are running the agenda, all the government-funded NGOs, they did the survey. They all knew about it. And the survey probably showed that many people were happy with this coming in schools, but the people who really should have had their say weren't informed about it at all. It was done in the dark.
You bring up a very important point. We had Alvin Louis of Courage is a Habit on our program, and he talks about the surveys that are being given in schools under the guise of trying to ensure that we're more inclusive, we're supportive, but little do people know that people that, there's no other way to put it, nefarious individuals, nefarious organizations are testing the waters. They're gathering data on families. They're gathering data on family values. So parents, you need to be very mindful of and aware of that surveys are being given to your kids without your awareness. The schools have to give consent, and you have the right to have your child not take it, but at least that is in the US and Canada. Speak to that, Jana, because that is so important for parents to understand, that as you are sending your children off to schools these days, or to school these days, they are being indoctrinated, meaning they are being unduly influenced. Deviant sexuality now is being introduced to them. Issues of books. Jana, you can speak to that as well. And then information is being gleaned about you, meaning parents, about you and your kids and your families. And that information is being used ultimately against the parents to usurp parental rights and to divide children from their parents. So, Jana, speak to some of those issues.
Absolutely. So the survey I was referencing was one that the NCCA, which is our national curriculum body, funded by the government, they are part of the education system where they design curriculums, and they were looking to add the gender ideology, pornography into the school curriculum. And most things that would be a change would come through our school communication system for the parents to submit a survey and give feedback, such as disability services, digital literacy, a variety of things. But this particular survey was not communicated to parents or teachers at all. So it begged the question, did they really want parent feedback, or did they want to say they went out for the feedback as a tick box exercise? They surely didn't want the feedback. We found the survey. We did a big campaign to let parents know about the survey, to submit their feedback, their concerns. I worked with a group of teachers, the Irish Education Alliance. I worked with a group of parents on the Parents' Rights Alliance, and then my own Natural Women's Council to do submissions and submit a document to say we do not consent to this. And then we got it into the public eye. And no parent that I've spoken to wants this in schools. No teacher I've spoken to wants to teach this, yet they're trying to push it in, having complete disregard to the families and the teachers, and just bulldoze it right into the schools. So we are now running an opt-out campaign with a group who's helping us with some of the legal templates, a group of lawyers in Ireland called Lawyers for Justice Ireland, who do all pro bono work, all volunteer to support parents against some of this madness. And there's some letter templates where parents can absolutely opt their children out of this education in schools under the Article 41.1 of the Constitution, and I think the Education Act of 98. So we're opting our kids right out of it, and the school is obligated to find an alternative activity and give supervision to the children who are being opted out of this ideology.
Okay, so Jana, I just want to interrupt for a second here. Jana, my question is, I've gone through the same thing here in Canada. What I was able to do was my daughter had recognized that she was coerced and pressured into taking this, we'll call it a survey, but it came from one specific area, and it came from Canada here. And this Canadian company with this doctor who's involved, and he's worked at several universities on the west coast and the east coast of Canada. He is now in charge of a company called the Learning Bar Inc. Have you heard of that before?
I haven't heard of that before. No, we have a lot of bodies here that work on behalf of trans rights, TENI belong to, and they've been very heavily involved in helping design the school curriculum to make sure that
what they're designing is actually based around the Learning Bar Inc.'s information. They're the designer of the whole concept here. I've been able to track it back to them. And this is happening not only here in Canada, but the United States. It's happening in Guatemala, Argentina. There's other places. I'm thinking that they've also made it their way over to the UK. And I'm thinking that they've made their way to Ireland as well. So what I'll do is I have all that documentation. I will forward that to you in an email. We'll get that to you. You can take a look and see if that is tied together, and you'll know exactly where it comes. One of the interesting things that I found about this was the company originates in Delaware, where Joe Biden's home is. So I found that to be rather interesting in the sense that Joe Biden always brags about how Delaware has the highest amount of corporations registered as independents, because it's really easy to do there, and they have no real laws, and everybody can register a corporation or a business number or whatever. So that's how this guy got in. I've managed to track him down, as I said, and I think that's going to come in handy for you to investigate a little bit deeper and find out if you can get to the real source. I realize that Local people are the ones that are implementing it locally. But this ideology is something that's spreading now throughout the school systems globally.
It is. That's great. I'll look forward to that documentation and dig into it further here. We've done some digging here and finding out who's behind this agenda. You know, despite that parents and teachers don't want it, the groups that are behind it are very much the LGBTQI plus groups, getting heavily funded by the Minister of Children's Department, who's the Minister of Children, Disability, and everything in Ireland. So he's also one that's pushing this into schools.
Jana, you referenced that you have documents that parents can access that can help parents opt their children out. Now, I'm aware of the fact that you're in Ireland, but if an attorney here in the U.S. that is pro-family, pro-traditional values, as it were, pro-normal, or parents themselves, would they be able? So they're going to have to do their own research as far as what applies for their own locality or state or province or country.
Yes.
Would they be able to access that same template or some of these examples? Do you have a website they can go to?
Yeah, the website, I'm building mine. I have, as the Natural Women's Council, we're grassroots. We don't get any funding, so we haven't got our own website yet. We're working on that. But there's a fantastic group of teachers, the Irish Education Alliance.com. They have a website and they have some of those templates on their website. I'll make sure that the most updated ones are on there, and I can also email them to you. Ours is around the Constitution and parental rights in the Constitution. You know, as a parent, we don't have to allow our kids to be taught anything that goes against our core values, our beliefs, be it religious or not religious. So we have that constitutional protection. So I'm sure there must be something in the US, whether it's the Constitution or a state law or something that would protect the parents from, you know, having their children go through something that would be contradictory to their values.
There's so much we're going to be talking about still today. We're going to continue on part 2. We still have a little bit of time on this segment, and then we will have you back because you indicated that you have a number of teachers and others that will be willing to share from the other side of the pond. I guess they say, at least in England, so I don't know what they say in Ireland, and what a wonderful thing for all of us from all continents to be able to really focus our efforts and collaborate on how to protect families and how to protect kids, the most vulnerable among us, from this predatory scheme. I call the trans movement, I call it the trans deception. It is the world's largest man-made psychological scheme, scam, and deception that is designed to, and it's purposely focused on gaining access to the private spaces and private parts of the most vulnerable among us. We've talked about how for children, the trans deception, its intentions are this. They're going to get kids onto a moving sidewalk, as it were. The kid gets into this ideology. We used to use the term brainwashing, but people don't like that term anymore. It's still right? So they're going to drink the Kool-Aid. So they're going to be mentally and emotionally manipulated. We get them onto this moving sidewalk, and it's going to go through stages of grooming or influence, undue influence, to where eventually they will be put on the medicalized path toward the ultimate end, which will be sterilization and amputation, and with cult-like influence. By the time a child is dumped out onto the surgeon's gurney, they have also been so influenced that they have been drawn away from parents into the community or the family. Meaning, I use that term euphemistically, every cult, right, will create an us versus them. And if any parent tries to rescue their child from a cult, right, the cult's going to react as though, get your hands off our child. Don't you try to convert our child away from. So that should ring a bell. Anti-conversion therapy is another way of saying, don't you dare stop this child. You think it's your child. The cult says it's our child now. Hands off, parents. So you have seen that in schools, and then you've seen what these deviant men are trying to do as far as co-opt even not just the private spaces, but in a way, body parts, trying to co-opt breasts and wombs and all that. So let's first speak to your concerns as a mother. What have you seen? What have you spoken out against as far as the dangers of the trans deceptions focus on kids? And then in part two, we'll begin to focus on your concerns where men are then being allowed into the private spaces of women, whether also including sports, prisons, and then what's happening to women's rights. So let's focus right now on the children and the schools. Talk to us about your concerns and what you've seen.
Yeah, thanks, John. My concern, the word you said that resonates with me and that really should terrify any parent is the word vulnerable. So an article came out in the Irish paper there back on, I think, October 2nd, just gone. And it had an analysis that was done that said up to 90% of people here seeking gender services may have been autistic, up to 90%. So when I look at the word vulnerable, what this is going to do in schools, I envision a classroom. The class sizes here are about 30 children. And in that classroom, you're going to have kids from all walks of society, from all different homes, be it homes that, maybe don't have the strong kind of family unit. Maybe there's poverty. Maybe there's sexual abuse. Maybe it's a divorced family or what have you. And that child who's vulnerable has this planted in their mind that their gender is fluid. I'm a boy, but can become a girl, or a girl and I can become a boy. There was actually a video that was on the INTO, which is the Irish National Teachers Organization, which was a cartoon video teaching teachers on how to deal with students who are, maybe confused. And it had Liam and Lucy. I can send you that clip. It's quite frightening that Liam realizes he can be a girl and Lucy realizes she can be gay. And it was promoting trans and gay to young, it was down to the 5-year-old level. Now, the INTO took that video down after a lot of complaints, but that's what they want in schools. So back to vulnerable, it's those children who are vulnerable that if they are convinced that their gender is fluid, that maybe they think, gosh, maybe that will make me feel normal, or maybe that will make me popular in school or give me confidence, or gosh, maybe I am born in the wrong body. And as an adult, we should never, ever reaffirm to a child that they are born in the wrong body. Nobody's perfect. Nobody is born perfect, nor should we strive for perfection. But to actually make a young, innocent child think they're born in the wrong body to the point where they want to do chemical castration or medical, mutilation, that is just beyond belief. And it's those vulnerable kids who will fall victim to this path, or as you said, this cult. And we've had parents here I've talked to where someone I know, their daughter wants to transition to become a boy. And obviously the father's very, concerned about this. And the daughter said, if you try to stop me, I will kill myself. And imagine being that parent with their head over the barrel saying, I want to love and support them, but they're so wrapped up now in this ideology and they've been sucked into this, this ideology abyss that they're going to take their life if I don't put them through this service. I mean, that should terrify any mother or father.
And by the way, as a therapist who's worked extensively with severely emotionally disturbed kids, because if you have a child that is saying, I don't want to be, if you have a girl that says, I don't want to be a girl, I want to be a boy, again, that's the key red flag indicator of sexual abuse right there. But let's say there isn't, but they've been scripted. You're talking about a child that is deeply disturbed. And so to think that someone would then exploit that vulnerability, that confusion, instead of figuring out where that came from, that should terrify any of us to think that there are adults that are more than happy to take advantage of those kids. And these kids are being taught talking points. And I want to assure parents that that child did not come up with that idea on their own. If you don't let me transition, I'm going to kill myself. We hear that same thing. Would you rather have, or let's say a father or a mother, a parent of a daughter, would you rather have a live son or a dead daughter? That is sick. because none of that has to happen.
No. No. And I think the danger is we gender stereotype. So, for example, I grew up in rural Maine and I played in the mud and, caught frogs and went quad biking and skiing and rode a motorbike and all these things that generally boys would do. And I wore kind of boyish clothes and my mom cut my hair and it probably looked like a boy haircut. If I was a child now, the same child I was in the 70s as a tomboy, I could have been led easily down that path of, well, am I born in the wrong body? And some boys are just feminine and some little girls are tomboys. That does not mean they're born in the wrong body. We need to stop gender stereotyping them.
Jana, we've just begun to even talk about your concerns, our concerns about the trans deception, the trans movement's focus on kids, really unduly influencing them. They're introducing sexualized concepts prior to the age of puberty. No child has sexual confusion prior to the age of puberty unless it's been introduced, because children won't have a sexual thought prior to puberty. That idea that children are sexual from birth, that came from Alfred Kinsey, a deceptive pedophile. His work was deceptive. That was uncovered by Judith Riesman, a good friend of mine, who we were thinking about writing a book together just prior to her death. So Kinsey was unmasked as a great fraud. He unleashed the sexual revolution in the U.S. Hugh Hefner then came from that. Thus was launched pornography, and the rest is history. Without pornography, the trans movement would eventually, without its influence, without people using it to groom kids, the trans movement would dry up and go way back to the numbers we saw in 2005, which are zero. We're going to continue. If you would be willing to stay with us, we're going to pick up part 2, and we will continue to talk about the influence of this as far as the movement, the trans movement, targeting kids, as well as then the concerns you have about these deviant men, these sexually deviant men that are using this as a means of accessing vulnerable women, the spaces of women, as well as getting into women's sports, getting into female prisons. And then ultimately, a case could be made, they are going to relegate women, quite frankly, to sex objects. They're going to silence women. They're silencing women's voices. This is the existential threat for women. Jana, will you stay right there and we will pick it up at part 2?
Absolutely.
Brad?
Well, thank you very much, both of you. Great part 1. We've got so much more to come on the show. Part 2, Jana and Jon are going to delve again deeper into this issue and take you to a place that hopefully helps both mentally and physically. I'm Brad Wilder, your host. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to check out our website at unmaskingatransmovement.com. I'll see you next time.